Conversations podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Conversations podcast. My name is Fatih and I'm the Head of Training at All Graduates Interpreting and Translating. Before we start, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that I am recording today's podcast on the traditional land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to the elders both past and present. Today, I'm very lucky to have Mary Gurgone as my guest, who is the founding member of the Association for Culturally Appropriate Services, which is a not-for-profit organisation located in Western Australia, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Mary, welcome. How are you?
Well, how are you going, Fatih?
Very, very good. Thank you. So good to see you. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
You're welcome.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction for you, so our listeners and viewers get a bit of an idea of the service that you have given to our industry. Now, Mary Gurgone is one of the most influential names when it comes to our translation and interpreting industry, as well as the multicultural sector across the nation. She's been on the NAATI Board of Directors and is a founding member, fellow, and a former national president of AUSIT. That's the Australian Institute of Interpreters and Translators. She's also the director of the Centre for Capability and Culture, and she has qualifications in governance, teaching, vocational education, and interpreting and translating. In 2006, Mary led her organisation to win the WA Government's Multicultural Award. Now, there are so many more achievements, so many more things on your resume, Mary. If I do go through all of them, I think that the entire episode will be dedicated to what you've done for our sector. So if you would like a more full bio on what Mary's done, please do read the description, the episode description for her full bio. Mary, thank you so much again for being my guest today. Now, we can talk a lot about a lot of things with you. Like I mentioned, you've done many, many things over the years in our industry. But today I'd like to focus on AfCAS, so the Association for Culturally Appropriate Services, which is in Western Australia. And Mary's joining us from Perth. Tell us a little bit about AfCAS and what does it do and why was it formed?
Well, the Association for Culturally Appropriate Services was formed in 2018. It was basically formed because a number of ethnic aged care providers and culturally and linguistically diverse communities got together and basically expressed their concern about the fact that in the aged care sector at the time, there was a move towards funding the bigger vanilla organisations rather than the ethnic-specific ones because it's cheaper to do so in that way. But with that comes the loss for culturally and linguistically diverse communities in getting culturally appropriate services. So it was formed very much with the concept of providing a voice to people of other cultures, both the ethnic-specific providers and those who are consumers, if you like, the culturally and linguistically diverse communities, and are also the voice of their communities. So what the association has been able to provide so far has been very much a focus on providing, seminars and so on that provide support to not only ethnic-specific organisations, but also anybody who is providing aged care services to people of other cultures, which is more or less every aged care provider, can get specific support about how they may better serve those people regarding everything from language services to food to any other ways of overcoming the isolation factor that can come from not being able to speak to people, especially with dementia, returning to primary language and so on. We run a lot of workshops where we provide support to the culturally and linguistically diverse communities as well as the aged care providers around the things that they need. Like, for example, coming up soon, we're providing some support on social media from a terrific speaker who does fantastic work in the culturally and linguistically diverse communities, as well as being a researcher and facilitator and university professor and so on. So we've got, a really wide array from one end of the provider to the called community and some of their needs to make their voices heard through supporting them to get their voices heard on LinkedIn and Facebook, etc., just by having someone on the ground providing them with that kind of support. So that's kind of like a potted history, if you like, of some of the things that made us be formed and some of the things we're currently providing, including the things I didn't mention is we do provide one-on-one support to organisations who are trying to, for example, get their multicultural services in order, whether that's through the verification process, where they have to verify that they are being culturally appropriate, as well as things like getting their charter done, making sure that they have culturally safe practices and that sort of thing. So we do provide specific support to organisations and individuals who are seeking to do that kind of thing.
How's the uptake been? So, because you said in 2018 the organisation was formed, is it more that you go to organisations and have to explain to them that, this is what you need, or do you find more and more that they're coming to you now?
I think it's a mixture. The first thing is that organisations have been forced to think about people of other cultures because they have come under heavy scrutiny about, where the Royal Commission said that people of other cultures were being treated without respect. That's not something that the aged care sector likes to consider would be what they are doing. They clearly want to show respect and care for people of other cultures. So there's that. Then, of course, there's the quality standards where cultural safety is one of the quality standards they have to meet. And thirdly, as a result of the Royal Commission, there's been a number of processes set up through things like verification processes. They have to show that if they want to show that they are providing services for people of other cultures, they have got to verify that. So there's been that. But the other part of it, I think, is that there's still a lot of lack of awareness. And frankly, even with the Royal Commission, I found it amazing that once they although they said there was a lack of respect for people of other cultures and so on and all of that, when it came to recommendations, they only suggested the first number of things, whereas in other areas they had about 144 recommendations. There was a recommendation. So, keeping in mind that 144 recommendations is a lot to implement, there may be many that aren't implemented. When suggestions are made, it's not surprising that they may or may not come to fruition. So those sorts of things have been part of the journey that has made work in our industry, and I don't think I'm speaking just for myself, but in our industry it continues to be the challenge we face.
And it's unfortunate in a way that this country, it's not anything new that we've been a multicultural country. I mean, we are based on multiculturalism from our First Nations people all the way to the Anglo-Saxon settlement, and then over the many wars the world has seen, many migration, refugees. This isn't something that just happened overnight. This has been happening over centuries. And, we're still kind of surprised and go, oh, my God, we need multicultural services. Lucky there are organisations like yours. Even the most recent census is saying that over 50% of the population speak a second language at home. I think it's time that we really wake up and, not be so surprised by these numbers.
Very good point. When you look at the stats also around the fact that despite the closed borders in the last couple of years, that we have actually got still, the highest percentage of people born overseas that we've ever had, that I think speaks volumes as well, doesn't it? That clearly we have fundamentally shifted the way we are in Australia in the last generation. And it's been such a quiet revolution that people kind of, have thought of it as that's who we are. But really, it's increased that whole focus on people of other cultures in everything we do. And yet there hasn't been a recognition of that, So I think it's a double step, isn't it,
Yeah, but definitely hopeful though. There is been a lot that I can see, many positive things being done over the last few years. Not just in aged care, but just with equitability, with multiculturalism and other cultures in general. I think we've come a long way in the last few years compared to the last couple of hundred years. It's definitely positive, I think.
Yes.
So if you were to talk to me about some of the challenges that the organisation meets, I mean, we had a little bit of a chat already, but on a day-to-day basis, what kind of challenges does AfCAS meet? And can you also give me some examples of some of the events that you've organised?
Sure. I think the biggest problem for not-for-profits generally and AfCAS specifically is resourcing. Because clearly when we do things, we do it with passion and commitment. We have high levels of commitment from many volunteers. We have great partnerships with organisations where, we've worked with you and with NAATI, for example, in many of our workshops and seminars. But in the end, you do have to, in order to have the quality and the voice that you require in such an important area, have to have the resourcing. And I think that continues, in my view, to be a continuing issue for most not-for-profits, is the resourcing area.
You do an amazing job with your team, though, and Irene Mooney there as well. Just organising these amazing speakers, these amazing presenters. I was very lucky to be invited to be on a couple of the panels that you organised. And, they are always very, very experienced, very, very informative. So big kudos to you and the team at AfCAS. It's not easy bringing, 10, 12 people onto a panel and then in some cases doing it hybrid, in person and online. So on behalf of everyone else, thank you for your organisational skills and and the efforts of your team there.
Well, thank you, Fatih. It's certainly been a pleasure to work with you and NAATI because you both, I think it's three organisations, we are like-minded about wanting to offer something meaningful and quality to people, both online and in person. So, as you say, like some of the things we have done together with the voluntary assisted dying as an example, having senior people, I think it's fantastic to see senior people from government recognising our sector and the AfCAS as well as part of that relationship we have with them, that they actually recognise our contribution to this important area because they see well the things that we're talking about. That is that, there are a large and growing proportion of clients that they must serve in a different way in order to serve them appropriately. And that, I think, is, as you said, regarding progress, that's probably the biggest progress. But the challenge continues to be, I think, is the advocating and marketing elements are demanding of resource, aren't they? They are not resource-free. And that is, I think, one of our, how to give that voice, amplify that voice, isn't it,
Definitely. Are you open to volunteers? I mean, how can people come and approach you and volunteer their skills and time?
Yes, we are. And we've been very blessed in having fantastic partnerships with other organisations who are far better resourced, such as Edith Cowan University. I have an intern here, for example, at the moment. But they aren't just at internship level. It's also at the other level where, for example, last week, we were invited to speak at their jobs forum. So alongside, large organisations such as Rio Tinto and, other at the big end of town, we also had Irene Mooney was able to talk about the sorts of jobs in the aged care sector, for example, and some of the important elements of culturally appropriate care and language service issues. So I think there is an opportunity as well as a challenge relating to, like we've got the volunteers, they're passionate, they're committed, we've got great partnerships, and obviously we get invited, therefore, to speak. Like I'll be speaking again at an Edith Cowan event soon. I get invited onto, key organisations, advisory committees and so on. I think we've sat together on a number of them online, haven't we, with NARI, the National Ageing Research Institute, but also other organisations like the Telethon Institute here and so on, where the voice of migrants and culturally appropriate care and language services are recognised as important, and they are inviting our voices on there. And I think that's very encouraging indeed. However, as you rightly said, despite that, still a lot more needs to be done, doesn't it?
No, that's definitely true. Well, when it comes to Western Australia, it's such a vast and big state, isn't it? It's half the country. The population is dispensed throughout the state. What are some of the challenges you think are particular to Western Australia when it comes to providing cold services?
I think it's a very good point, and it's something that I think you and I discussed as we were preparing for our last seminar together, wasn't it, with the language services for aged care, in order to make sure that they receive the right care. Having a thin market, it provides a number of challenges. The first one is that isolation gets a different level. Like isolation in Australia, of course, is at a different level. But when you talk about Western Australia, it's really very similar to the stuff, like when you talk about the Kimberley, it's very similar to what the Northern Territory experiences. It's that kind of isolation. And you may have a person who may be the only speaker of their language in that particular town. And if with dementia they go back to that primary language, they really can't even, when they go to hospital, they've got no one who can help them get the right service that they require. So it's very fundamentally an issue, the isolation at a geographic level. But at the other side of the equation is the language services side and other ethnic-specific services side, is because of the thin market, then those people who we get who are, have fantastic skills, we find it hard to retain those people, because why would they do that when they can go into a government job where they can, or private sector job for that matter, where they can earn significantly more using other skills rather than their language skills or their culturally appropriate specific skills, So that is, I think, one of the other elements, is the dumbing down and the deterioration of the numbers of resources that we get in the delivery of services as well. So I think if organisations such as AfCAS and such as, NAATI or your organisation aren't around to push for that, I think even using online is good, but we have to have local people with local commitment, if that makes sense,
Oh, definitely. I mean, yes, online interpreting, whether it be remote interpreting, whether it be via video or phone, I mean, it's better than no interpreting, but then there are some cases where you must have a face-to-face interpreter. It's just so important, and not having access to that language service would be against someone's human rights, wouldn't it?
Good point. I mean, the voluntary assisted dying workshop we held, I think, highlighted some of the deeply traumatic and personal issues that arise in that situation, where if you don't have someone who you can reach out to on a physical level, it could be really, really difficult to do. It's better, obviously, online than nothing, but there is something missing as well, isn't there, in those deeply traumatic moments.
Oh, definitely. Look, within regards to AfCAS, do you think now, almost going to the 5th year, I guess, that you're reaching your outcomes? Do you think that you can see some changes? How much have you achieved, and how much more is there to go?
Oh, look, I think I'd be lying if I said that we've reached the Mecca. Definitely, like I can see huge amounts of work to be done, clearly. But one of the things that I think is good is that we are reaching some mainstream organisations. So, for example, recently I was invited by Legal Aid to be part of messaging to the disability sector around the need for language services and language-specific supports, and to give culturally and linguistically diverse community members who are dealing with the disability either personally or in their family or whatever, giving them a voice. And I thought that was a very good step in the right direction. Equally, hearing that the Disability Royal Commission wants to hear and wants to overcome some of the challenges that we referred to earlier that happened as part of the Aged Care Royal Commission, where, for whatever reason, there's a slip twixt the cup and the lip, a recognition of an issue and then going on to the next step and actually making sure there's a recommendation in place that looks at systemic change, not, it'd be nice if you guys would do this, which, let's face it, when there's what you have to do and with what you'd like to do, the have to do tends to win, doesn't it, Yeah.
Definitely.
So I do think that's an example of where I can see outcomes from the point of view of learning from mistakes and being invited to the table. Those outcomes are happening much more. I think we need to do a lot more, all of us. And one of the great things that has happened is the partnerships with not only ethnic specific and, but mainstream organisations coming to the table. I think recently, for example, having Brightwater, that's a fairly large provider here, wanting to speak about some of the challenges they are having to access language services and they provide both disability and aged care, as many organisations do. And that, I think, is a real outcome, getting those kinds of organisations wanting to change from vanilla kind of service to a more ethnically sensitive approach,
No, definitely. That was a great insight in that presentation. It's been a few months ago now, and it's the issues that that presenter was talking about. They were very, very real issues, and with some maybe not so difficult ways to address them, but she just didn't really know how and where, and it was just really good to see, TIS was presenting there, and I think, as a result of that particular presentation that day, she would have realized that she would have access to TIS or other remote interpreting services. And I think it's sometimes, because we're in the industry, we take it for granted with the knowledge that we have. And it's like, oh, well, there are all these services, why don't you use them? But people don't know about it. And that's okay. We need to tell them about it. Yeah. Just because we know about it doesn't mean everyone else knows about it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And I think the other part of the coin, which I think is, the two aspects to that, is that the services that are providing services, we know that they too don't necessarily have the level of resourcing they would like. But there is an issue of communication, isn't there? In the sense that
definitely
some of the bigger providers are still having difficulty knowing how to access an interpreter. Is it says, it really is a big statement, isn't it?
I don't know if it's a marketing issue for our industry. I don't know if people just want to look the other way. I find it quite surprising when you meet some of these organizations and they're like, oh, I can do that. I'm like, yes, you can do that. And, it's nothing new. It's been around for decades. I mean, we created telephone interpreting. It's been around since 1973.
Exactly.
And you might have funding for it. You might have free access to it. Like, oh, wow, really? Like, yes. So maybe it's also a little bit on us as well, not doing enough to promote our services.
Yeah.
And everyone from NAATI to Audit to LSPs to everyone working within our industry to maybe make a little bit more noise about what we do and how they can access us.
A very good point, and that's what I particularly like, the fact that one of the things that AfCAS has done a lot of is working in partnerships and collaboratively, because organisations working in partnership, you can let people know about a wider array of what's available. And I think that's really, really important. And that includes, that service of free translation services for aged care, for example. We know that many people were totally unaware of that, and I suspect they still are. And it is...
Honestly, I was unaware until you told me.
Yeah. So, and that, it's a shame when great things are being done and they're held, the light is under a bushel, so no one knows the light's there, So it's a very important thing. The other part of the aged care sector, which, I suppose many people are aware of, is that they are so short-staffed, because obviously there's a growing volume of care required and people going into care, if you like, at a later stage in their lives, which is, absolutely fantastic. But that means that if they don't have the extra resourcing, they only land up doing the most important upfront stuff, and some things
just
fall
the
off
basics
the perch,
to keep someone alive.
Yeah. And certain things fall off the perch, and that can include, unfortunately, culturally appropriate services, which you and I know you can't give person-centred care if you don't know the person, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's like...
Definitely. I mean, especially for our elderly, culture is so important. I mean, maybe I've assimilated more, let's say, who knows what's going to happen to me when I'm in my latter years, and even though I'm in language, I'm in multicultural, I might just revert back to just that single culture and that single language. It's just mind-blowing to see that, especially, we're thinking about how the multicultural elder, they would be so intact, so close with their culture and language, and to not have that, to see that, as you said before, falling off the sides when it is who they are.
Yeah.
My culture, my language is who I am.
Yeah.
And then you're just reduced to a living being that needs to be kept alive by being fed and being cleaned and having a hygienic environment. Okay, these are very, very important things. But what makes us us is our culture and is our language. And all of a sudden, you don't have that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I saw some wonderful work from people around Australia, for people of other cultures. And one of the fundamental things that really made me think was that whole thing. I think this guy did a little video from one of the guys from Sydney. He runs great programs. And it was called The Reason Why, I think it was called. And basically, people... exist rather than live if you don't give them a reason for living, if you know what I mean. And if you don't understand who they are and their language, keeping them clean is not going to do it. It's not enough. It really does need that person to feel that you are extending your hand in friendship and hear what they're trying to tell you, and even understand what they're trying to tell you, that sort of thing, and it is that two-way deal, isn't it? And I think that's what's missing at the moment, is it's not considered fundamental to be able to understand what the person is telling you. It's still considered, where there's a legal requirement. Do you know what I'm saying? If there's a financial issue or there's an abuse issue, then, you clearly must have someone there, and possibly medical, depending on, what the medical issue is, because in aged care, obviously, everything is medical. A lot of the time there's medical connotations to a lot of services. But it's interesting that what you say. I think it's a very
People's lives are reduced to the services that they need, not the life that they should live, but the services that they need. I think that's what happens.
And that's really wasting a lot of talent, because in the days of this new generation coming through who are all computer literate and so on, there's a powerhouse still to be had, isn't there, with the knowledge that resides with the elderly. And the more respect we can pay them, the more we'll get back, can't we?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Are there other organisations like AfCAS around the nation? We know AfCAS only takes care of WA, right? Are there other partner organisations around Australia that you work with in regards to what you do?
There isn't 100% overlay with any one organisation. I think the unique elements of AfCAS is that we are a not-for-profit, and we equally give voice to culturally and linguistically diverse communities and support culturally and linguistically diverse communities as to the providers of services. So that's, I think, the unique element. There are, of course, a lot of government type services that also do great work, but clearly the government service is constrained by what the government funding allows that particular service provider to do. And so, for example, I used to be the director of the Partners in Culturally Appropriate Care program in WA.
Known as PCAC, yeah?
PCAC, yeah. And, of course, as part of that, I did a lot of work in this area as part of my paid work in the private sector organisation I was heading up, excuse me, as and because it was a national service, while I provided local services for PCAC, I provide local meaning West Australia wide, which is half the nation, obviously, geographically, which was a pretty big challenge. But the other part was through my private sector work, I was doing work nationally in aged care as well as other areas. And I found that there really are not that many organisations, because even PCAC is constrained heavily by what the government will allow the focus to be, and constrained significantly by the resources available in the particular service they provide, if that makes sense,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Mary. I want to take you back a few years. I know that you were on the NAATI board. I think it was 2014. You've been in the industry and in the cultural and linguistically diverse space for a long, long time as well, like you said. And we know that NAATI recently has gone through many, many changes. I work closely with NAATI. You work closely with NAATI. I'm probably quite new in the industry. I've only been around since 2015. I was living another life before then.
Wow.
But I got into the TNI sector in 2015.
Wow.
So when you compare how things were, how do you think, can you give us a comparison of how things are now and how they were before in the TNI space? Are we moving in the right direction? Can you see some improvements? What more could be done?
Sure. Obviously, the amount of time we have, I'll just give quick things. There's some things.
This is probably like this one will take another few hours to dwell into. But just in a nutshell, what things were like and how they are now. You like the way things are going, because lots of changes happening with the testing system, with the certification system. What are your thoughts?
Well, we can start that the common denominator between us and is the NAATI one, where we've worked a lot with. Both of us have worked with NAATI a lot, and are very proud to work with a great organisation. And being frank, NAATI was important to set up, but when it was set up, they started very much, from an organisation of trying to get some standards in an industry which was totally voluntary, which but on the one hand, it's wonderful that there were these volunteers, but on the other, clearly when you're talking about medical interpreting, legal interpreting, all the areas where issues, great and important issues, can be misinterpreted, it really was required. So it was wonderful that NAATI was born, and I did see that in those early days that we had, small voluntary interpreting and translating bodies that were set up in the States that were really, really a good, important thing to be done. But it was one of the reasons that I certainly was happy to be one of the founding people for AUSIT, was that we really needed a national voice, because each state doing its own thing does reduce the amount of opportunity for the voice for the voice to be heard. So I think when AUSIT was established as a national body, it basically was a nothing body in the sense that it was on a wish and a dream. And from there, we have seen AUSIT become a fantastic opportunity for interpreters and translators to work together, hasn't it? And we've seen growth and development, and we've seen the journals. Like, I remember having to do newsletters and on a photocopier with the local MP giving me access to the photocopying. That's what we're talking about, right? So you're going back a few years.
Now there's a communications officer, social media officer.
Exactly.
So much PD.
Exactly.
An amazing national conference. And it's internationally renowned now, I think.
Exactly. And we, I remember the first time we affiliated with the FIT, and we were able to run the first FIT Congress in Melbourne. I mean, it's a wonderful thing that we now have an international voice. And I remember nominating Adolfo Gentile to go on the, on the FIT committee. It's not everything, but it's certainly a big step, isn't it? All of those things happening. Where I've also been heavily involved, in the education and training sector. And there I have seen huge changes from having no, courses to, being part of the push where I, got some courses going in the TAFE sector. Adolfo, I think, was in TAFE at the time, and we pushed to get those things done, and then into the university sector, and they grew and grew, and then they came through a really bad time where everything seemed to fold. But I think that everything has started moving again, and I think the technology has been our friend in this particular way, hasn't it? Because if we look back to as you say, the accreditation system for NAATI and the problems we were having in getting change from where we were to where we wanted to be, and how even with COVID, we've been able to keep doing the testing in NAATI and so on. It's just been a fantastic, phenomenal thing. Is it perfect? No. But isn't it wonderful that even though people told us, look, Aboriginal languages are different, it's a waste of time, you shouldn't be looking at that, look at what you need to look at, that we now have a system that is looking at the quality in Aboriginal languages. And I'm not saying
the Indigenous interpreting project that they run there is just amazing. The people that are at the helm there, and every year there's more and more languages being tested. Some great training opportunities are there for Indigenous interpreters, and I was very lucky enough to work with some of them as well. Definitely. I also find, over the last few years, they're more open, more accessible. I think they're engaging with the industry more. It's not just a door with a sign on it anymore. I think, you can really contact them and they'll help resolve issues. And I think they're really active within the industry now as well. I just think our industry in general, even maybe not in spite of COVID, maybe because of COVID, maybe because of accessibility, everything's kind of coming together. I've seen that the education sector, the professional bodies, the certification sector, not-for-profit organisations like yours. I've been working closely with Centre for Cultural Diversity and Ageing as well. I really think that everything's kind of coming together recently, and I'm very positive. And like you say, there's still a long way to go, and I don't think we can ever say, "Oh, yep, we're there now." But I'm very positive about what's happened over the last few years, and I think we're all facing the same direction. Lots of LSPs coming on board with some training and PD as well, and I deal with a lot of practitioners on a daily basis. Our interpreters, our translators, they're all very much interested in doing better, being better, and hopefully one day they'll also be paid better, get what they deserve. It'd be really painful to see so much effort put into training practitioners. It's really important for us to retain them, I think.
You've raised a really important point, and that is true, that we have done so much work in the process of getting a better system of testing and a better system and supporting the people who are in the testing system in NAATI, really supporting them much, much more strongly. And so that's great. But if you require a lot of input, then clearly, as you say, people need to get that recognition if they're working in the industry, and that continues to be an issue. And part of it is, I believe, a cultural change, like the cultural change you spoke about in NAATI. I believe, I had the good fortune to be part of that cultural change that happened from 2014 especially. And I think that was part of it, as we know, has got to do with the leadership. We were blessed to have really good people, such as the CEO of NAATI, Mark, being, coming into the organisation during the time that I was on the board, and we were able to really look at cultural change. That's equally important, isn't it, to other technical issues, is having a culture of open door, of open to ideas, and very much innovative in the way that we solve these problems.
100%.
I think that's 100%. All good. But we do need, I think, a different cultural change too in those organisations. Right, from government to private sector, there needs to be a better look at culture. Isn't now we doing our acknowledgement to country, therefore we are very culturally appropriate. That's not enough. We need to do more, and both for Aboriginal languages and Aboriginal culture, and for culturally and linguistically diverse members of our community, because clearly that's the way we're going to get ahead, isn't it?
That's right. Look, there is a long way to go still. I mean, in some instances, it still feels like things are being done to tick boxes. Services are being provided, but services can't be accessed. So many translations hidden behind a million clicks. You need to really speak and write English at a high level to be able to access your translation. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
sometimes, let alone having access to a computer, because some of the clients currently are just
exactly.
ridiculous.
And who's to say everyone's literate as well? We know that when people arrived here in the 60s, 70s, and this country needed labourers, they needed factory workers. I know within my community, they came and built cars here for 35, 40 years. They came and built telephone systems for 35, 40 years. And they came from a tiny village in Turkey, and they didn't really know how to read and write.
Yes.
And they are here by the thousands.
Yes.
The thousands, not a few.
Yes.
And then you can't just say, oh, well, they should have learned how to read and write. No, they didn't, because they were too busy building your cars, building your telephone systems, So you can't just translate something on a piece of paper, hide it behind 5 clicks, and say, I've provided this service to you.
Absolutely. You're quite correct. And I think that the issues, the dual issues out there around recognising the reality of the post-war migration experience, where people came here they were called migrants, but in many cases they were refugee-like in many ways because of the fact that they were escaping war-torn countries. They may have been illiterate in their own countries because they were not given the opportunity to be able to read and write. And therefore, to ask those people to come here, work 6.5, 7 days a week to make ends meet for their families, and then also somehow learn English, just is a pipe dream, isn't it? It just wasn't going to happen.
I know. It's yes, humanitarian visas, yes, refugee visas. We we're being very humane about it all, but we're also gaining labourers, aren't we? At the same time,
Exactly. We're gaining.
there is that side. There is that side of it too.
Exactly.
We're not just getting these people in over the last 100 years or so and saying, oh well, come in. Do anything you want. You don't have to work. Well, you've had a hard life. Now come and live a good life. No, this is. We can even see it now. We're in need of more skills.
Exactly.
And I don't believe in skilled, unskilled. Everyone provides some kind of skill. So yes, like you say, there are improvements, but I think there's still a bit to go. And I think the services are, yes, being provided more, but they need to be more accessible. Like you said about Brightwater, so many organisations like that have the same pains, that need the same services, but they don't even know who to go to, where to go to, how to get them. So everything seems a little bit disconnected at the moment. There are lots of positive things being done, but I think we really need to bring things together. Like you say, it's a cultural thing. It's not just about acknowledging country or making putting a translation on your website. It is not just providing services for legal or medical services in language. We were saying that's not what life should be reduced down to.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's one of the beautiful things, though, that you've said. That is, looking at the whole human being is part of any service. And if you don't look at the whole human being, you're not going to be able to provide reasonable service, and you can be held to account under humanitarian requirements, can't you?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Look, so good to talk to you as always, Mary.
Yes, indeed.
I think we can go
Likewise.
for hours, but we'll for maybe this is chapter one of many chapters, Mary. We'll keep chatting to you. Let's spruik AfCAS for a bit. Do you have any new events coming up? How can people access these events? Are they going to be just in person? Will they be online? Sell some events to me.
Yeah. So the upcoming event within the next 4 weeks, we're going to be really targeting very much local people at that particular time, because it's a hands-on workshop relating to social media, because many people who are passionate about a cause or are passionate about spruiking their particular not-for-profit organisation or cultural community group don't necessarily feel that they have the knowledge and of certain things to maximise the use of social media as a free marketing tool. So we're really focusing on those people who need that kind of support this particular time. However, the future, as you're aware, we do a lot of workshops that are online that have allowed both international and interstate contributions, and we obviously are looking forward to running something that will allow that into the future. You and I spoke, I think, and we're about to speak further about what is the next step in language services, not only for aged care, but disability care. So one of the areas that we're looking at is disability at the moment, because the Disability Royal Commission reports that, you can have input until December this year. So we've been working pretty hard to get that voice out. And what we also want to do is have some sort of ongoing contact and building the disability sector to get to know what language services are around, because as you may be aware, they're even less supported as far as the culturally appropriate care is concerned, because they don't have an organisation such as PICAC supporting them, and therefore they are very much left to their own devices. So we're looking at doing some of those sorts of things, and especially as the Royal Commission has expressed interest in this area, we think it's a good opportunity to look at holding something of that nature in the near future. Yeah.
Wonderful. And can people access previous recordings on the website?
Yes, we've got previous recordings on our website. Now, the one that we held with you, you kindly put it onto a particular thing. So I think we've put that out fairly widely about where people can access that one. But most of the others we have on our website. And if there is any workshop you're interested in that you can't see readily where it is, just you can easily get in touch with either the Association for Culturally Appropriate Services, and it's a very easy email, info@afcas.net, and I will certainly make sure that you get whatever information and recording you would like.
Yes, I can vouch for the fact that you are info@afcas.net. So, straight to the horse's mouth, so to say. Okay, Mary, thank you so much. We'll put the website link to the episode description as well, so anyone can just go click and have a bit of a wonder. If they have any questions, they can email info@afcas.net. And I look forward to chatting to you again in the not so distant future, Mary. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great talking to you as always, Fatih. I always enjoy our chats. I feel the next step has to be meeting in person.
I can't believe we still haven't done that, Mary.
I know. I feel as though we should, because it's been 2 years of this, hasn't it? This closed border thing. But this year is the year.
I think this is when we break it. Well, how about we just organise a conference for you to come over?
Sounds cool.
All right, to be honest with you, I feel like I've met you anyway. Like when you just said we haven't met, I'm like, oh my God, we haven't met, in person.
It's true.
But yes, we definitely, we've probably been in contact so much more than people that we could be in person with. So I've kind of grown to love this whole remote socializing thing. But yes, definitely. I can't wait till I can actually see you and give you a nice hug. And we might even have a couple of glasses. Exactly.
That's great.
All right. Thank you so much, Mary. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for today's podcast. I was with Mary Gurgone, who is the founding member of AfCAS. And please click on the website link, have a bit of a wander around, and you can access any previous previous events, or you can register for any future events as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so that you can get updates on whenever that we have new podcasts up, new lectures up, and so on. So thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Fatih.
Conversations Podcast.